first time I had wild rice, now if you do not get out of my face, Benjamin, thank you. Real wild rice. Monoman, the good berry in Anishinaabe and Psin in Dakota. The first time I had it, my mind was blown that a delicious grain like this was just growing happily here in the Midwest. It was literally so good. The Anishinaabe, upon being given a prophecy to leave the Northeast and go to a place where food grew on the water, got to the Great Lakes and were like, this has got to be the foretold food because it's delicious, nutritious, and it's everywhere. I had never been ricing before. I live here, where Monoman's cousin, southern wild rice, Zizania aquatica, is on the threatened list. And thus, we don't have a permit system for harvest, which some upper Midwest states like Minnesota do. Which is why my newly purchased out-of-stater permit and I got on a 5 a.m. flight to the Twin Cities to meet up with one Sam Thayer. Sam's a critically acclaimed wild food writer, forager, and all-around great guy, and he's gonna take me ricing for the first time, pending I don't flip the canoe, which hopefully I won't, because I was a river lifeguard for 4 years, and that would be very embarrassing for me. Ricing is an example of indigenous agricultural science, nay, agricultural genius. First, you locate a large patch of wild rice. Northern wild rice loves freshwater creeks, rivers, and lake edges, and southern wild rice is much the same, except it can tolerate brackish water, letting it grow closer to the ocean. Then, it's time to take to the water. In a canoe, there are two jobs, one who pulls and one who knocks. Pulling is using a long stick to maneuver through the rice bed with more accuracy than a paddle.
Show them the Bidens that's making us, not the president.
Not the president, this Biden's that's making it hard for us to move around right now. And you do it while standing. You've got to have a mad balance, which is why I am the one who knocks. Knocking is the 1-2 motion of leaning several plants over the canoe with one stick and then using the vibrations of running the second stick over the stalks to knock the grains off and into the boat. The agricultural genius lies in this action, because while you catch most of the grains, a few will always fall into the water, effectively seeding the bed for the following rice season. Northern and southern wild rice, along with several other foraged grain crops like African wild rice, shatter, which means the grains fall off really easily. While their Asian counterparts were bred to shatter less, many global indigenous cultures worked with that aspect of the rice, developing similar strategies to knocking so you would both harvest and plant in one move. You also see this in the western US with our native rice grasses, except it was gathered on foot and knocked into baskets, not canoes. Sorry, while putting this together, I imagined the slight but not impossible possibility that hundreds of years ago, my indigenous ancestors in the southeast US introduced one of my newly arrived African ancestors to southern wild rice, and I don't know, maybe my African ancestor felt a little more at home having met a similar plant that's gathered in a similar way to wild rice back home. Maybe it fostered some level of friendship or camaraderie or feeling of safety, and now I'm crying, so give me a second. Okay, so now you have a canoe full of rice. Now what? It's time for processing. Traditionally, the newly gathered rice is left out to dry, but I only had a couple days up north, and we suspected that parching the rice green could still have great results. Parching is keeping the grains constantly moving in a copper or iron cauldron so the last bit of moisture cooks off, and the papery coverings on the rice grains dehydrate, making them easier to remove. The way I would have Michelle Obama arms if I was doing this all the time every fall. You can't tell right here, but my right shoulder is on fire, moving the 17 pounds of green rice, but thankfully it gets lighter as you parch. Next was the part I was the most excited for. This is me fueling up for it with apples from Sam's orchard. It is time to dance the rice, which is exactly what it sounds like. Sam has these amazing buckskin moccasins from a local Anishinaabe craftsman, and they are perfect for not getting stabbed a bajillion times by the rice while you dance it. The dancing, for which a hip moment is a requirement. I would never do the elliptical at the gym again if I was dancing rice frequently.
Every now and then, just change positions so that it doesn't like find a little crevice where it hides and doesn't get.
Yeah, much more exhausting than the stirring and the ricing. Rubs the grains together under your feet, essentially turning their papery covering to dust. The move kind of reminds me of my Cape Verdean aunties and uncles dancing when I was little. Rice dust. Once the papery grain covers have been pulverized by the dance, it's time to winnow the dust away. Pouring the rice back and forth with a nice breeze, and sometimes that breeze is provided by a box fan, gets rid of the gritty dust that you would not want to put into your mouth hole. And here's our rice, I cannot believe that I helped do this. I know that some folks can get like hundreds of pounds in a day, but I'm so proud of the 4 quarts of finished rice we ended up with. The green parched rice was fluffier and nutty, and it felt like maybe it cooks a little faster. If you want to try real wild rice for yourself, several native bands like the White Earth Nation sell hand-harvested and parched rice. And they even granted rice its own personhood. So lawsuits could be filed on the rice's behalf when its habitat is put at risk by pollution or by development. But my hope for your heart is that someday you get to see this amazing plant in person and relish in a tradition that was held on to even through colonization. Thank you, Sam, for taking me ricing. And thank you to all of the indigenous groups who keep ricing alive. Maybe one day I'll live to see a world in which the waters are clean enough and the grains are bountiful enough that we can rice here in Ohio. Happy snacking. Don't die. Not the TSA pulling my bag like they always do after I've been foraging. And not the TSA agent telling me how to cook the wild rice. I said I wanted to try making wild rice crispy treats, and he's like, wild rice doesn't work well sweet. And I was like, pardon me.